She literally dropped it at their feet and was like, pick it up. If it's that important to you, you will research that, find how it works for you, and then see how it works and fits for your birth. But the ultimate everything is it is on you. I'm witnessing that you're asking, and I will support whatever you need. And that was so loud to me. And I was like, oh my gosh. It doesn't matter how many articles I send and whatever, if they still want me to recap the articles I sent them, who's doing the labor here? Welcome to the Birth Education Center podcast, hosted by myself, Care Messer, an entrepreneur, birth educator, and doula. My team and I want to help you discover your options in birth and postpartum, how to find your voice, and how to use that voice to navigate our maternal healthcare system. You and your baby are not just a number. This information includes doulas too. Now let's get started. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to kind of piggyback on last week's episode on labor pain, labor discomfort, letting go as you're feeling things that are uncomfortable. And we're switching over to doula mode. As doulas, if we don't understand how to let go and also be in discomfort and surrender to what's happening in front of us. One of the things that we go over in the doula series is figuring out your own stuff so that you can hold space in a place of welcome and allowing an openness instead of control, fear, and I'm not enough. So that's what this episode today is going to be about.
So as new doulas, when we first start out, we find ourselves excited, ready. I always say like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And we have this, for better or for worse, this unstoppable feeling that we're going to go out and save all the births and help everyone. And we're going to revolutionize birth. And
I remember feeling that bright-eyed, bushy-tailed feeling and like, oh, this is it. I'm just literally going to save everybody. And then the older birth workers saying, yeah, 25 years ago, I thought I was going to make a big difference and everything's still kind of the same. And I thought, oh, how sad. Because we're here now as this new generation and we're going to make everything work at the hospitals, etc. And now 17 years in, I'm like, wow, how much has not changed? And has it gotten worse since the pandemic? And so interesting to look back on my seniors as now that I'm the senior. Yikes.
oh, I even think about, how many doulas came out of every training. Like in my training, there were 15 of us, I think, and I am still doulaing, and one of them became a midwife. And that's it, I think. And because it's very telling that there aren't even that many older doulas who can look at the younger doulas coming out of training and say, hold on, slow down a little bit, breathe, because the burnout rate is so high. And what we're talking about today is not just for you as a doula, but for the families you serve. And that conversation about getting burnt out and being able to maintain and continue is part of it when we're talking about how this impacts you, this pressure that we feel as doulas to control and fix and save
and deliver perfect outcomes.
Yes.
With no trauma.
Yes. To produce what we feel are acceptable results, what that does to us in terms of our ability to continue doing this business. As Kara and I will say over and over and over again, you'll hear us say in all of our doula episodes and in the class, what we're going for when we're helping doulas is sustainability in this work, because we want doulas to keep working. We want doulas who come out of these trainings so excited and wide-eyed to be the older doulas eventually. And they're only going to be able to do that and get there if they're able to find a place of balance and to use the tools and skills that we talk about to slow down and figure out what they bring to the table versus trying to provide everything for everybody or control outcomes.
Well, and that also goes for birth educators, right? We know what we're going to teach and how we're going to teach it, and it's going to inspire everybody, and they're going to do what we say, and they're going to ask the right questions, and they're not going to feel bullied and whatever. Not our job, but boy, do we take it on. And I am guilty of that and still sometimes have to check myself like, whoa, wait a minute, not my story. Like, I have my feels about certain things. I definitely have my biases, but as an educator, I'm here to offer and then step back. Like, we are not here to save. And that is the hardest part about the doula work until we come to a place of understanding who we are, what we offer, and how we can step back and hold space.
It can be hard to get a bunch of after class emails and hear maybe outcomes that didn't go as planned or things that they weren't hoping for their birth, or even occasionally I'll hear parents say, I don't know if I did it right. And I have to respond and say, yes, you absolutely did. And it's recognizing that every family is going to take what they need from the class and use it in the way that they need to in their birth, and that I'm not ultimately responsible. And that's really what this episode is about, is that we are not responsible for what people physically experience when they're giving birth, for how long births are, for the behavior of medical personnel. We have a role, but it's not to save and fix everything. That's not our job. And when we come out of our trainings, we're all coming from different places in terms of what brought us into doula work. And sometimes we are, highly motivated by trauma, and it shows in our approaches, in our sort of, I don't want to say aggressive, maybe aggressive is not the right word.
Maybe it is in
Maybe
some
it is
cases.
in some cases, but this really excitable, sometimes aggressive sort of approach.
Maybe enthusiastic,
Enthusiastic.
like over enthusiastic about what we can deliver and
Yeah.
what can happen. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That, obviously it's a spectrum, but especially I find, and as a doula myself who got into this with the motivation of my own traumatic birth experience, I definitely felt that like I need to go in and just like start swinging basically, and like overhaul the system and keep all the things away from my parents and all of this. And then we also have doulas that are coming in motivated by their super empowering and sometimes blissful birth experiences. And while it's not necessarily the same where they're coming in looking for a fight, I think sometimes it sets up this unreasonable expectation that everyone can have the birth experience that they had, or that everybody wants the birth experience that they had. And so I think either way, we always come into birth work with our own biases and filters that really affect us, especially when we're first starting out and trying to figure out who we are in birth work. And something that we work really hard with doulas on when they're training with us is unpacking their baggage and setting it aside
isn't
and
that
leaving
so
it.
funny? That fine line of my birth was so amazing. I want to inspire you because I know it can happen for you. And the everything happened like crap for me. And so we're not letting that happen to you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can have a mixture of both. You absolutely
Yeah.
can. But recognizing that that is your experience, your lived experience, and not projecting that and gifting that to your families is the key to a doula who recognizes this is not my birth experience. I'm going to step back a little bit. I'm going to offer both sides. Like I'm not going to say that's the experienced doula because a lot of us don't even get to that point in this birth work before we're out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you can get to that earlier, it shifts everything for yourself and how you are experiencing the births, and also for your families that you're helping and guiding and loving through this.
Yeah, I mean, and I have often heard doulas, especially, and not just doulas, birth workers as well, talk about, oh, these doulas with their birth trauma and their, savior complexes and blah, 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 which we're going to be talking about today. But I feel like doulas who have had unmedicated births or home births or birth center births, or are really kind of ingrained in that natural birth, or they had orgasmic births or ecstatic births, they don't necessarily recognize how that bias also plays into their approaches to supporting births, and how we can't want something for everyone because it was right for us. And we can definitely project that onto people. And we also find ourselves like judging other birth workers because of their approaches. And so I
Well,
think
and
that,
we naturally judge midwives, doctors, nurses, and we have no idea what their lived experiences are,
yeah,
right?
we don't even think about ever
Mm-mm.
how did this person give birth or how were they born when they're
And what have
in.
they witnessed in the birth room over and over and over?
Yes,
Like
exactly.
we maybe come combative with them, but we have no idea, and we're not recognizing the spiritual elements that have made them where they are at this point in their careers.
Yep, exactly. So we always want to caution like new doulas to try to avoid as best they can projecting their desires or their fears onto their parents or the providers that they interact with because it's not yours. And we're going to dig into that. A phrase that kind of floats around that you'll hear that maybe can feel hard to define is holding space. And that's really, as a newer doula, the thing that you should put the most effort into learning how to do is holding space. How to be present in a room, in a birth, in a family dynamic as neutrally as you possibly can be and feel the role that you need to take on and where you can be of service. That starts with holding space. It's basically setting yourself to like in your car, like setting your car in neutral, setting yourself into neutral and breathing in the space and simply being present, right? Phones away, not looking at the watch, not looking at the clock, not necessarily saying anything,
But how often do we even do that in our
listening.
regular life?
Never,
Never.
ever.
I mean, there are a few, but we
But
don't
not in
have,
our day to day, right?
mm-mm, we're not
It's
well practiced in that.
exactly. It's something that is, I think, again, it's like this kind of ambiguous term and it just the term itself takes up a lot of space when we're talking about like what doula support is without being well defined. And that's because everybody has to explore what it means to be still. And we don't practice that in modern society. It's not something that we for most of the time apply ourselves to unless you are someone who actively meditates or actively does yoga or practices active listening or has like a background in psychology or something like that. It's not something that we're very familiar with. We certainly don't take time for ourselves to be calm and quiet and still. And so we can say it can be regurgitated to us in training, but it is something that we need to get practiced in. And I would say for in terms of what skills you should have in the birth room. Newer doulas, if you only practiced and being present and holding space for your parents, you would be an incredible doula and everything else will fall into place. You will figure out and hone what tools and tips and tricks you bring to the table, but that presence is everything. Remember that the definition of a doula, what makes doulas different from nurses and doctors and family members is continuous support and it doesn't say what that continuous support has to be. So remember that the presence is the most important thing. That's where it starts. That is the definition of our job is being present continuously for the family. And I will say especially in our modern hospital system, it expands beyond that, especially for marginalized families, especially for families of color, for Black families, for single parents where we might find ourselves in more of a partner role, that advocacy and protection are very, very important. Expansions on that holding space, right? It's still that being present as a almost as a barrier between your family and the care, quote unquote care or lack of care that they may be experiencing. I never want to downplay that or set that aside. That as Kara and I say constantly, advocacy is part of being a doula, but remember that it starts from presence and holding space, that being there is what allows us to do those other things. And so we need to get back to that understanding rather than tips, tricks, tools, all the lessons, all the education. And then ultimately, what we're trying to do is control outcomes. to first be still and be present. And then the rest of it will come. So, Kara, do you want to talk a little bit about holding space?
Yeah. And I think we need to also come into the understanding that we are all individually, including our families, everybody on the planet, are a conscious being with choice. Each individual autonomous human being has a choice as to how we read a situation, how we respond to a situation, how we decide to feel about a situation. Every single human on the planet has that innate ability, and it is their inherent right, and an inherent part of our being is that we are a conscious being with choice. That is always in front of us, how we want to interpret things, etc. If we come from that understanding and we understand that the person in front of us has exactly those same options to choose right or left, what they want to take in or spit out, and we give them that as their gift to themselves, it's going to be less likely that we stomp on that or take over or try to control it. And that we're less likely in letting other people do that to us. So I think if we come from that basis, we're all conscious beings with choice. What I have to offer is this. How you take it is another thing. So holding space, when we're talking about holding space, I think if we want to come to a kind of an understanding of what that can be, so that if we refer back to holding space, we've got kind of a common definition of what that is. Ashley, you chime in here as you want. My understanding and belief about holding space is that it's a space of allowing. It's a space of noticing. It's a space of understanding that this is what's happening in the moment. I have no control over it. How will this play out? Those are the questions going through my head. Is there a role I need to take? Or is it the sacred timeout space to just allow and be present with it? Is that uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. Is it meant to be uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. Sometimes holding space is beautiful. Sometimes it's the holding space of this beautiful birth and this baby on the chest and the warm feelings in the room and not saying anything and just observing and baking in that. That's what we all want to get to, whatever that looks like. However, there are moments in birth like that, parts of labor that are just going smooth. And there's no need to step in and help and be the doula and be I can do it better than dad can, or whatever it is that we're thinking, but just allowing things to take place in their own time. The kind of holding space where it is super uncomfortable, I think, is probably the most sacred part of holding space, because that's where we're expanding our capacity to hold difficult things, to understand that someone else is going through difficult things, to have compassion for the journey that they're on in that moment. And once we realize that we are not the savior to step in, when we do step in, if we do, it's in a more compassionate and allowing way than controlling and trying to divert to what we think needs to happen. Because the universe sets up some really amazing scenarios sometimes for our learning, their learning, our growth, their growth, that we are just witnesses to, and we're meant to just be witnesses to. How can we, as doulas, before we start attending births or as we are attending births, get well-versed and practiced in allowing the shit to hit the fan as it needs to hit the fan? And that can be emotionally, mentally, physically. How can we sit and be present in that? That comes from practice in our regular life. I control as much as I can control in my life because that's how I feel safe.
Really?
I know. Surprise? You? The woman who has 85 projects going at all times and knows exactly where she is.
I'm so proud of Kara for saying that out loud on the podcast. And I really hope that this part stays in the podcast because
it's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
Trust us. We're speaking from a place of conscious awareness of our own shortcomings and failings. I'm terrible at not being busy. Like, I can't do one thing. I'm watching TV with my phone in my hand and eating a snack and talking to my kids and
And
Like,
part of that's your neurospicy stuff,
yes, it
right?
is.
More than
Yeah.
controlling, but mine's all controlling. I'm not
Yeah.
neurospicy. I just wish I could claim it, but I can't.
But I think, my favorite phrase that Carrie uses, and I say a lot, is staying curious about what can be learned and what is being learned and what is unfolding in front of us rather than wanting to control it or be afraid, right? And I know we spent a lot of time on this, the topic of holding space, but I think it's because it's so critical to recognize that, like, 90% almost of our role as doulas is just being in the room. And, this is leading us to the further conversation about where we try to control things and what happens when we're trying to, create dynamics or control dynamics or direct things to go a certain way, right? And I know I experienced this when I first started out, of really feeling like the gold standard, like the gold medal for a birth outcome, was a natural unmedicated birth. And I saw that as the achievement. I saw that as the goal
Well, and it's reinforced, right? If you look on
constantly.
social media, I had 23 births this year. 3 were this, 4 were this, and it's literally a standard. Like, these were unmedicated, these were cesarean, these were no intervention, whatever. Why are we counting births like that?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of terrifying. How about we had 23 births, 3 in May, 6 in March, whatever that is. Like,
Yeah.
maybe not tell everyone you have 12 births in March, because that might be, oh, she's a little overextended. But that's a different standard than what we're seeing. And
Yeah.
that reinforces the gold standard.
Oh, and we're putting this insane pressure on ourselves to this delusion of control that somehow I'm going to walk into this birth and I'm going to make it so that they don't get pain medication and they don't take any interventions and the baby's going to come out vaginally and everything's going to be great. And,
Wow, the
like,
mental load on that
oh my God.
before you even get to the birth, the load that you are carrying to make things perfect.
Exactly.
Yikes.
Yikes is right. Like,
Been there, done that.
because then what happens when it doesn't go that way? Because, guys, if they don't want a natural birth or they're not invested in a natural birth, nothing you do is going to make it happen. You're not going to have their baby for them, right? So then when it doesn't go as planned, when it becomes a shit show of induction, maybe a distant partner, maybe they didn't take any classes or they did and they didn't like the classes, or
Or they froze instead of all the advocacy that you drilled into their head that they had to ask. And then they just decided, nah, and just went with whatever they wanted to.
there are so many things that we can't control, like where they feel their labor, and when your
Baby's position,
baby's
that could shift
position,
everything.
everything about it, right? And, so if you have someone who's had a long back labor and then their midwife puts icy hot on their back that has been rubbed raw from counter pressure and sets their back on fire,
Doesn't
there's a
go
lot.
away.
Yeah, there's a lot going that can be going on at these births. And um it goes back to that recognition of, this is not your birth. It's not even the parents' birth, if we're going to get really spiritual with it, right? Like, this baby is coming into this world and they're going to do what they need to do to get here safely. They're going to come out the door they need to come out of. The labor is going to be as long as they need it to be. But ultimately, you're there to support the parents through this. And you are not there to do it for them. You can't. And you are not there to force them to do the things you want them to do, to get educated or use their tools the way you want them to refuse an epidural because you want them to, or to refuse a C-section because you want them to.
Well, and let's go back to where that's coming from, our savior complex, right? Maybe we wanted someone to save us. Nobody did. So now we're the advocate. I want newer doulas especially to look at your website through a filter of, does this look like I'm here to save everybody? Am I wording things to where you're getting the right person because I do this and this, and doulas will take you down from 41%, you'll have a better birth outcome and whatever? Are you quoting all the things to say, I am here to be your savior. I'm going to prevent all these things from happening. Hey, look at this checkoff list of how amazing this is what a doula does. And then how is your wording on your website? What are you selling to them? Does it sound like, and sometimes we're too hesitant to even say that we're good at what we do. So there's a balance there too, right? Like, well, I don't want to say that because I'm really not that experienced. I don't want to come across like that. But at the same time, I want to seem confident. But I can just tell them that I know what I'm doing more than they know what they're doing. And I really look at your wording because we do that in class too. We go through our wording that we have on our website. Does it seem like we are selling an outcome? Because we can't sell that outcome. We have no right to, for one.
Oh,
Why
I
is it
love
our
that.
right to prevent or sell that?
Mhm.
Right? Because we don't know what the universe and this baby are trying to teach their parents, what their parents' lessons they need to learn are, what the partnership needs to learn. We have no clue about that because there's a spiritual element that comes through every single birth. So look, for one, at your website. How are you selling or not selling? And is there room for more of a holding space and allowing and a witnessing? Because we have to come to that place before we can ask a parent to come to that place. Because sometimes they have to hold space for their baby. Like, what is happening right now? I've done everything. I've taken the classes. I've done all the spinning babies. What's happening right now? They're holding their own space for their baby like you're holding for them. There's kind of a layer of that. And we don't know that until we're in it.
And, I had to come to the sort of like reckoning as a doula of like, why does my value or like whether or not this birth was a success or a failure hinge on whether or not this person had an epidural or whether or not this person had a vaginal birth or whether or not this person had a fast labor when none of it has anything to do with me. And the reality is everybody who wants doula support deserves doula support, regardless of what type of birth they want or are planning or are hoping for. And when we tie ourselves to this idea of like what makes a doula, we're actually removing our availability to help families who maybe are looking for something different or need something different, right? High risk families, families having multiples, single moms, people with traumatic experiences life who know that they're going to need some kind of pain medication. If we are so focused on, I must get the natural birth, I must get the vaginal birth, and if I don't do these things, that somehow I have failed or I'm not a doula, I'm not a good enough doula, then look at this narrow window that we're creating for ourselves for like the type of doula support that we are cultivating,
Ooh, and
that we could
more mental
provide.
pressure on ourselves that
Yeah.
we are responsible for. It is not the job. It is us putting, which we do in everyday life anyway.
Remember, your job is to support families. And a phrase that you'll hear a lot from Kara and I in our doula series and probably in some of our other doula episodes is meeting parents where they are. And that's our job, right? We come into their lives for a season, whether it's to interview us, whether they hire us or not, to work with us in their birth, to maybe stay in touch with us after the birth and continue to be a support for them. Maybe we never hear from them again. But our job is to meet people where they are and to be the support that they need us to be, not what we think we're supposed to be a good doula. And
You
it
know, I just had a story that came to me. As an educator, um, there's a she's masterful. There just aren't words for Nicole Morales. If anybody knows Nicole Morales in the breech space, she's written books. She's the leading expert and she teaches birthing from within. She's the master. We're the same age, but she's like 10,000 years older than me in wisdom and
in
knowledge
her
and
soul.
oh, her soul. She's planetary. Like this woman is incredible. And I asked her if I could observe her class and her 4 or 5 week series. I think it was 6 weeks at the time. And I sat there and I took copious notes. like everything that came out of her mouth, half of it was over my head. I was like, this woman, like she's just amazing. And her storytelling ability, like I was in awe. And I'm watching the interactions of the parents. And one thing I kept noticing is a parent would ask a question about back labor or something, and she'd say, yeah, you should research that. And then she would go on with whatever she was talking about. And then somebody would say, I heard blah, blah, blah about, and she's like, yeah, that can happen. And she would explain a little bit and she'd say, you should look into that. She literally dropped it at their feet and was like, pick it up. If it's that important to you, you will research that, find how it works for you, and then see how it works and fits for your birth. But the ultimate everything is it is on you. I'm witnessing that you're asking, and I will support whatever you need. And that was so loud to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, it doesn't matter how many articles I send and whatever. If they still want me to recap the articles I sent them, who's doing the labor here?
Yeah.
I can't birth the baby. This is not okay. So if you ask me a question and I send you the information and then you never bother to read it, cool. But I'm not going to recap it. Because now I understand, like Nicole, it was the best lesson I could have learned. And I will tell you, I mean, I'm not kidding you. I took 25,000 notes because it was just so rich. And within a week, I had lost that notebook. I went back to kind of skim over it. It was gone. Never have found it to this day. And I was like, oh, it was devastating. And then I was like, oh,
You got what you needed.
it was meant to be felt. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was devastating at the time.
It's the old adage that we say all the time. You can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink. You can present them with the knowledge. You can
Inspire the heck out of them.
Yeah,
Hear them from the sidelines.
You can have hopes and dreams for how you hope their birth is going to go and what you want from them, but the work is theirs, especially if you're working with a couple. That dynamic, there's years and years and years for most couples of dynamics that you will never be privy to leading up to that point of them having the baby. And they have years and years and years and years of co-parenting in front of them that you will have nothing to do with. So you're there to support them. You are not there to micromanage any of it. What the partner does, what they do when they're having their baby. Again, you're there to be a witness. You're there to provide support. You're there to offer knowledge and tools. And then ultimately, you have to let it go. And if you think you're there to do anything else, if you think you're there to save the birth, if you think that you can come into a birth, and I have heard the ego come out of some doulas who thought every birth I go to is a natural birth. I haven't had an epidural in years. I haven't done this or that or the other thing. Well, first of all, let's talk about selection bias, where you're only taking certain clients that
Only
align with what you're looking for.
That have had a successful home birth, right?
Right. Which, great, good for you, right? Do what you do, set your boundaries, but let's not pretend that you have any control over what is happening in that birth room.
Or who should you be taking credit for someone else's hard work?
Boom. Exactly. Like, who do you think you are, right? To say that, well, all of my moms do this and all of my families do this and these are all of my outcomes, right? As if you birthed the baby, right? That's a savior complex. And that can really turn on you. Sometimes we have, doulas kind of walking around preening proud of their outcomes. Sometimes a savior complex ends in us walking away from the business because we couldn't save enough people, or we couldn't achieve those births that everybody said were the gold standard, and we feel like failures because we're not recognizing that being there is enough, that the success is in the support that you provided to the family. And that makes you a good doula, not whether or not your clients get epidurals or whether or not they get induced or whether or not they choose a home birth. If you are walking away able to see the value in what you provide, you're a good doula. That you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And
can we talk about the people pleasing part of this? And also, once again, go back to our websites and our, interviews. Like, I'm a chameleon. If that's what you want from me, I can do it, right? Savior complex is people pleasing. And if that midwife walks in, I can say this and this to make sure she knows I'm on both sides and I can help with whatever. And I may compromise on this and talk my parent into this because I do a lot of births with this midwife, right? Where is our knowledge of who we are as a person to just be a witness to what's happening with this family, not control and not want to be so much for everybody in the room that we completely screw ourselves as well as this baby in this family? Because that is not our job in a birth, is to please everybody. As a doula, I think and as an educator, anyone in birth work, whether you're a nurse, doctor, midwife, whatever, you have to be okay with being the villain in somebody else's story. And when you can get to that point of being okay with everybody hating you, everybody thinking you did a sucky job, everybody, whatever it is, and that can be in your real life too,
Oh,
because
yeah.
everyone has their own filter. Everyone's looking at it from their point of view. That means what it means to them. All you can actually control is your intent. My intent was to love, hold space, XYZ. I fell short to them in this, and this, because that's what their perception, their projection of who you were supposed to be for them. You can't control that. You cannot please everyone all the time. You know that in real life, but in birth work, holy crap, you cannot do it. And I know that I'm the villain in lots of stories. Like, I know it. Okay. I'm sure there are people that don't think they know that they're the villain in my stories too, because we attach different outcomes and shortcomings in ourselves and things we didn't want to recognize or work through on other people, so we don't have to take ownership of that. That's just what we do. It's a human thing. But understanding what your intent was and being okay with apologizing that what you did wasn't enough for them, even though you go, I did what I could. Like, I can still recognize, and I'm just saying this not as me, but like as a doula, I can still recognize that even if my intent was pure and perfect, they think I'm the devil. And can I give them a sincere apology for that, whether I think that or not? Because they're the one that lives with that outcome and vision forever. Am I going to be so egotistical and egocentric to say that was all them and I'm not going to give them an apology for it?
Yeah.
Why would we do that?
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to be like, I am so sorry. That wasn't my intention. I've had births like that where all of a sudden I got blasted at a birth I thought was really pretty okay. And you didn't do this and you didn't do this. And I didn't want an epidural and you didn't talk me out of it. And I remember it totally different at the time, right? It seemed like support to me and I was allowing what was happening, and nope, it was my fault. And I'm like, I'm going to take ownership of that. Even though inside I'm like, I remember it differently. But it doesn't matter at that moment. This person is carrying that load. I'm sorry, and there are, obviously this is not a hard and fast. There are some circumstances where you're like, I can't say I'm sorry for that because whatever. But spiritually, is it going to kill you to hold the space they need in that moment for an apology or for whatever it is? Like, can we
And you
drop
don't
the
have to
ego on that?
necessarily be sorry for anything that you did. You can be sorry for how they feel
Absolutely. And
and
compassionate.
compassionate. Again, holding space, like Kara said, for people's feelings. Being a good doula doesn't mean, again, even families being satisfied with your care all the time, because you are not ever going to be responsible for what they did or didn't take responsibility for, or what they are or are not ready to confront about their birth. And this is stuff that we go really deep into in our training in terms of talking about how to process births with people, how to, again, meet people where they are and talk to them about things and how families will remember things differently than we do. If we just are showing up and giving the best version of ourselves to each birth and being curious and open to what's going to unfold, and then allowing ourselves to be that support, then we will always be satisfied with the support that we provided. Sometimes shit's going to happen that we do need to apologize for. We're late. We don't hear the phone call. We say
Ugh,
something out of pocket
those
that
are
we
the
didn't mean to.
worst.
Especially when you're like overly tired and you don't necessarily realize like what you're saying or how you're saying it, or you didn't manage your tone, or
Or
you
what your face looks like. I've
your
had that where my face, oh my gosh, especially if we go over faces a lot in class, resting bitch face or disgust face when we don't mean to. It's so hard because people attach outcomes and information to that,
Yeah,
right?
and it's sure there can be shit that you should apologize for. That right? We're never above taking responsibility for the role that we play. But again, we're not tying ourselves to an outcome. We're not burdening ourselves with this is going to unfold in XYZ in this amount of time, and I'm going to provide this support, and they're going to be so happy with what I did. You can do everything right, and they might not still be happy. You can do everything right, and the doctor might hate you. And it's not just the villain in someone else's story, it's the other people's opinions of me are not my business. And
Oh, it's so hard though. I know
it's
you
so
say it.
hard
It's so
because if
hard.
you can sit and look at what you provided and who you were and you were present and you did your job, all you can do is your job. All you can be is the best version of yourself, period. That's all you can be.
And if you understand your intent, because I think most of us have kind of an intent all the time, like that we live by. And as birth workers, it's probably to help everybody, to meet people's needs, whoever's right in front of our face, plus all the people behind us, because we're taking care of everybody. Like that is our intent. And if we don't have good boundaries, that intent gets overworked and it's all over the place. Uh, but those are part of the questions as a doula, as you're growing, as a birth worker in general. My intent is to love and support. Am I projecting my fears on them? Am I trying to control the situation? Am I letting go and allowing? Am I holding that sacred space that's uncomfortable for me? Because the more, and I'm, how old am I now? 53? I don't know. I'm 100.
Just a baby.
At the gym, I was 83 in dog years or however they calculate it. That didn't make me very happy. I was like, well, it's
Cute.
been a while since I've been here. Yeah. And the older that I get in dog years, and from hearing what my mentors have said, because it is age with, there's wisdom in that, that the older you get, there's some wisdom that comes from, whoa, I have held on so tight in so many places in my life. Right now, I'm holding so tight. Why can't I recognize that things always work out? Like the early part of my life, it was an outward expression of things are being done to me. I'm a victim. Nothing's working out for me. I'm holding on to what if that pain is so much I can't handle it? The truth is, you can handle anything. But the control of, but what if I can't? So, how do I hedge my bets against avoiding that? As birth workers, taking those questions in, as in, where am I holding on too tight? Where can I start to let go of that? Where can I start to trust that? That is labor. That's what we're asking our families to come in and do. Let go. It's I got you. Like we're playing the universe role. I got you. I'm support. I'm God. I'm your higher power. Whatever that is, even if we're not being that, the emotional lesson that we're carrying is I've got you. You're not alone. And we're doing this together. So can we keep taking steps back in our own life to prove that to ourselves, that we're not doing this alone, that we have the support we need, that things are not being done to us, but we're an active participant in how our conscious being, a conscious being with choice, is filtering out the good, the bad, and the ugly. How are we responding to it instead of remaining victimized to it? Because those lessons and where we can loosen up and allow, we're only going to be better birth workers for them, only better support for them, and only way better in holding that sacred space of uncomfortable with them. And I think that wraps it up. So we'll see everybody next week.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it's your body, your choice, and finding your voice is your power. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us in all the places, and go to birtheducationcenter.com for our blog and more online education classes. And we'll see you next week.